The shifts that moved through this week did not end when the specific dates passed. That is not how this kind of energy works. The blood moon eclipse, the Venus-Uranus activation, the days of pressure and clarity that followed, these were not isolated events that turned on and then turned off on a schedule. They were a sequence, and the sequence is still completing itself. The energy released by that sequence is still moving through the structures of your life, still settling into new positions, still producing realizations and redirections in people who were paying enough attention to let it work. March 9th sits in a specific position inside that sequence. The acute intensity of the last several days has eased somewhat. The shock quality of the Venus-Uranus activation, the emotional charge of the blood moon aftermath, the disorienting blur of Mercury retrograde at its most intense. These have not vanished, but they have moved into a phase of integration rather than peak disruption. And integration has its own distinctive quality. Quieter than the peak, but in many ways more consequential, because integration is where the shifts become real, where the clarity that arrived during the intensity gets absorbed into how you actually see and move through your life. What many people notice around this point in a significant cosmic sequence, and this has been a genuinely significant sequence, one of the more concentrated clusters of astrological activity in recent months, is a strong internal push toward forward movement. Not the reactive urgency of the earlier days, not the pressure to act immediately from peak emotional activation. Something steadier, a pull toward something, a growing sense that a particular direction, idea, or change has been waiting for your full attention, and that the time for waiting is over. You may be feeling this today. The pull might be towards something you have been considering for a long time without fully committing, a project that has been living in the planning stage longer than the planning requires, a decision that has been held in deliberation past the point where deliberation is genuinely serving the decision-making process. The energy available right now has a quality of gentle but persistent forward insistence. The internal resistance that kept the plan in the planning stage, the fear that kept the decision in deliberation, has been worn down by the week's processing. What remains is the genuine desire, cleaner than it has been in a while, with less protective scaffolding around it. The recent eclipse and planetary activity produced a specific kind of clearing. Eclipses have this function at their core. They remove what was obscuring the view. The blood moon's particular quality of culmination and purging cleared emotional material that had been sitting in compression, taking up space, consuming resources that your genuine forward direction needs. The Venus-Uranus activation shook loose the attachment to arrangements and versions of your life that had become habitual rather than genuinely chosen. The Mercury retrograde period surfaced and resurfaced the unresolved matters until they received the engagement they needed. All of that clearing has produced space, and space, in the context of a life that is genuinely oriented toward growth, does not stay empty for long. The question is what fills it, whether what fills it is a return to the familiar patterns that the clearing displaced, or whether it is something new, something that has been waiting for exactly this kind of opening. March 9th is the day when many people begin to sense what wants to fill that space. There are specific things you may be noticing today that are worth taking seriously rather than explaining away. A sudden desire to move forward with something you have been delaying. The long-held idea that has not made it past the idea stage. The plan that has been ready for execution for longer than the execution has required. The creative project, the professional pivot, the relationship conversation, the personal change that has been living in a state of almost readiness without crossing over into actual movement. Today the almost readiness may have shifted into something more complete. The internal objections that were keeping it in the preparation phase may have quieted enough that the path forward is visible, and the remaining obstacle is simply the first step. If this is what you are experiencing today, the appropriate response is not to wait for additional confirmation that the timing is right. The timing is rarely announced as obviously right. What arrives instead is exactly what you are feeling, a window of reduced internal resistance, a clarity about the direction that makes the first step feel more accessible than it has, an energetic alignment between where you are and where the direction is pointing. These windows do not stay at their most accessible point indefinitely. The internal resistance that has been quieted by the week's processing will begin to rebuild as the energy settles. Moving before it rebuilds, not impulsively, not without the preparation that the idea has already received, but with the forward momentum that is available right now, is how you use the opening rather than letting it pass. A loss of motivation for something that once felt important. This is appearing for many people as a prominent feature of the post-eclipse, post-Venus-Uranus integration phase, and it deserves direct address because it tends to produce confusion and sometimes alarm. The thing that lost its pull was genuinely important to you at an earlier point. The investment you made in it was real. The fact that the motivation has shifted does not retroactively make those things untrue. What has changed is that the clearing of this week's cosmic sequence has updated your sense of what is genuinely aligned with where you are now, as distinct from where you were when you began investing in this direction. People change. Circumstances evolve. The goals and commitments that were precisely right at an earlier stage of your development are sometimes no longer precisely right at the current stage. The loss of motivation is the signal that this particular thing belongs to an earlier version of your path, rather than to the current one. That recognition, while disorienting, is valuable information. It frees up the energy and attention that was going toward sustaining the diminishing motivation, and points that energy toward what the current stage of your path actually requires. Unexpected conversations that reveal new possibilities. The conversations you were not planning to have that end up being the most significant ones. The casual exchange that turns in a direction you were not anticipating and leaves you with an idea or a connection or a piece of information that opens something up. The conversation with someone in your life where they say something that lands differently than their words would usually land, that takes on a weight and a relevance that ordinary conversation does not carry. Under the lingering influence of the eclipse cycle and the Venus-Uranus activation, conversations are running at a higher frequency of genuine revelation than usual. People are speaking more directly, sharing more honestly, expressing things that normally stay beneath the surface of ordinary social exchange. When a conversation today goes deeper than expected, follow it. The depth is not accidental. The direction it is going deserves your full attention, rather than a careful management back to comfortable shallows. The strong sense that something in your life is about to shift. This is perhaps the most difficult to describe precisely, but also the most widely reported experience in post-eclipse integration phases. A quality of imminence. The feeling that something is about to change, that you are standing at a threshold even if you cannot yet see what is on the other side of it. That feeling is not anxiety, and it is worth not treating it as anxiety. Anxiety is a response to uncertainty perceived as threat. The threshold feeling is a response to change perceived as incoming, present, real, and not yet fully visible. The threshold feeling is accurate. Something is about to shift, or is already shifting, in the way that your life is organized around your genuine priorities and desires. The eclipse and the planetary activations of this week have moved enough material that the landscape is genuinely different from what it was 10 days ago. What you are sensing is the difference, the new space, the redirected energy, the emerging shape of what comes next. Trust that feeling. Let it orient your attention, rather than triggering management responses designed to restore the feeling of stability. The stability you are sensing as temporarily absent is the stability of the old arrangement. The new stability, the one that reflects the updated version of your direction and your genuine priorities, is still forming. The threshold feeling is what it feels like to stand between the two. The signals available today, the pull toward the delayed idea, the released attachment, the revealing conversation, the sense of imminence, are easy to dismiss. The mind that is oriented towards certainty and planning will find reasons to classify each of these signals as something manageable rather than something directional. The delayed idea can wait a little longer. The loss of motivation is temporary tiredness. The conversation was just conversation. The threshold feeling is stress about other things. That dismissal is available to you. Many people take it, and in the days and weeks that follow, they wonder why the momentum of the week's significant cosmic sequence did not produce lasting change in their lives, without seeing clearly that they dismissed the signals at exactly the moment those signals were most available and most pointing toward the opening. The people who move forward faster than others through periods of genuine cosmic activation are generally not the people who received stronger signals. They are the people who took the signals seriously when they arrived, even before the full picture was clear, even before they had certainty about the outcome. Certainty about the outcome is rarely available at the beginning of a genuine new direction. What is available is clarity about the direction itself, combined with the internal readiness to take a step into it without the full map. Right now, you have access to that clarity. The week's processing has done the work of revealing what is genuinely aligned and what has been operating past its proper season in your life. The integration phase you are in today is where that revealed clarity is available in its most usable form, clear enough to act on, settled enough that the action does not require the same emotional urgency as the peak activation days, present enough that it has not yet faded back into the background of ordinary awareness. Some changes begin with an unmistakable event, a crisis, a confrontation, an obvious external shift that forces a new direction. But many of the most significant changes in a person's life begin quietly. They begin with a shift in motivation that was easy to dismiss, an unexpected conversation that was easy to treat as coincidence, a threshold feeling that was easy to explain as stress, a forward pull toward a long-held idea that was easy to defer for another week, another month, another indefinite later. The people who recognize these quiet beginnings for what they are, who register the internal signal before it has obvious external confirmation, who take the first step before the full path is visible. These people are not acting on blind faith. They are acting on the specific intelligence that a period of heightened cosmic activity has made available. They are using the clearing that the eclipse produced, the disruption that the Venus-Uranus activation introduced, the surfacing that Mercury retrograde has been performing. They are using all of that as navigational information rather than letting it pass as weather. March 9th is offering you that navigation. The new path that is opening is not announced. It is sensed, felt, glimpsed in the pull of a delayed idea and the quiet departure of an old attachment and the surprising turn of a conversation that went somewhere real. Look for it. Take it seriously. Take the first step toward it while the clarity is still available and before the internal resistance rebuilds and the familiar patterns reassert themselves and the window of this particular opening has passed. Some of the most important movements in a life begin on quiet days that do not announce their significance. Today may be one of those days. Pay attention to what you are being shown.